Well, ladies and gentlemen, after the weekend, I took like a whole one day off, and would you know it, the news just went bonkers. There's so many news stories, I really don't know where to start. Well, let's start at the beginning and just make our way through them. But before we do, don't forget to hit the like button, share, subscribe, all the usual YouTube things. So let's get on to the first news story, and that is that according to Stats SA, the population of black individuals in the country are actually remaining relatively young, but minorities are getting old. And this is actually showing that the population in terms of aging means that the black population is growing in terms of its demographic age, but the minorities population, which is white and Indian, are actually shrinking. Not because of any other reason than demographic decline. In other words, people are getting old, they're dying, they're not being replaced. So why is that? Well, the actual answer is a lot easier to understand, and the actual Stats SA article doesn't actually address the issues. And noticeably, the issue is that of the younger population immigrating and leaving the country. This should come as no surprise. The white population and the Indian population both typically are very well educated and are typically able to secure access to other countries, either through their ancestry or through the skills and the qualifications that they've obtained. So what does this actually mean? Well, it means that those populations are typically declining, their parents are getting older, the parents don't immigrate, but the parents are pushing the kids to emigrate, leaving the parents here to age and ultimately die. Now, you see, this becomes interesting because one of the topics currently in the news, as you will be aware, is that of the idea of the white genocide. This is the argument being pushed forward in some Afrikaans circles. But you have to ask yourself the question, what exactly does genocide mean? Now, if you take a stupid person's definition of genocide, then what you effectively think of is that you have this like ethnic cleansing. You stick people before an axe and you kill loads of people in a violent fashion. If you would suggest that that's happening in South Africa, specifically targeted to white people, I would say no. South Africa does have a very high crime rate, but it isn't specifically aimed at one specific ethnic group. That ethnic group may feel the effects of that violence more because they own more stuff. And so effectively they're the ones that are robbed from in larger numbers than others, but that doesn't mean that they're targeted just because they're white. However, if you understand genocide to be the erasure of a people, then I'm reminded that the Jews were erased from Spain in the 16th century by the Spanish, requiring them to convert to Christianity. That meant that ultimately, once the individuals had converted, they were no longer Jewish, well, specifically in the eyes of the Spanish authorities. And so what it actually meant is a total collapse in the number of Jews. That was effectively a Jewish genocide. So if you were to say that the white numbers or the minority populations in South Africa is shrinking because of demographic change, that effectively could be classed as a genocide because the number of individuals are shrinking. Now, you may want to ask yourself the question, why are they shrinking? Well, that actually becomes very curious because in many instances, it is due to the failing economy, the high crime rate, and to a large degree, the political rhetoric that means that these people are singled out when it comes to political war cries. That means that the environment of South Africa is no longer hospitable for them to grow as a population, meaning that the environment of South Africa is the cause of the genocide. Now, you may say, wow, that sounds complete rubbish, and you may want to argue why you feel that to be the case. But many of these individuals from minority groups will single out many various rationality, one of which may be the BEE criteria. Now, that in itself becomes interesting because the World Bank, yes, the World Bank has actually written to South Africa and said, you might want to ease on your BEE laws and your onerous labor laws, because these two things are directly responsible for hindering the inclusive growth or growth in the country as a whole. Why? Because they're becoming burdensome. Now, their rationality for this was actually very interesting. They said it's burdensome for small businesses who quite often don't have funds in terms of starting up to adhere to things that, frankly, is just going to give them cost. And they're new startups. You don't want to put costs on startups. But more interesting is that the actual burdensome nature of the criteria is actually on the state, because the state has to provide resource in order to monitor these stupid laws. And that in itself is providing a burden on the state, which also incurs a cost on the state. Coupled with the state being unable to actually provide services that it offers in the first place means that in many instances, the adherence to these rules are, well, non-existent. And that ultimately becomes the problem. Now, why this also became interesting and why other individuals may look at this and say, well, things are never going to change, is because the Black Business Council, yes, the Black Business Council, which pushes BEE, says that this rhetoric from the World Bank sounds just like Solidariteits and Afriforum. Must be them. It must be their effect. And that's the only reason they're saying this is just because they're racist and they've been affected by the racist Afriforum. Stupid people logic. But anyway, talking of other stupid people's logic, well, according to the MK party, the Afriforum delegation that went to the US to discuss the whole Trump issue has committed high treason. And so they have lodged a case with the police of high treason for these 4 individuals who went over there to discuss the plight of Afrikaners in America. And so they're encouraging these individuals to be arrested for exercising their free speech, which is them going over there and saying, we have some issues, please help us. But apparently this undermines the Republic. Now, why is it undermining the Republic? Well, as I'm sure you can guess, as of today, Trump cancelled more aid to South Africa. And this time it was to the funding that the UN gets for its food agencies, which have now had to shut their doors. Oh dear, they can't fund food programs anymore. Probably something the government should be funding. Now, there's a lot of this type of aid funding to South Africa that we've now seen cut. We've seen US aid cutting their funding, which means lots of NGOs that really shouldn't be here, lo and behold, they lost their funding. PEPRA funding's been cut, which means AIDS and TB. Now we've got the UN food agencies being cut because of Donald Trump's aid cuts. Donald Trump has cancelled like aid everywhere in South Africa. However, it needs to be mentioned because I see these comments in my comment section a lot. Donald Trump didn't focus on us specifically, right? I mean, yes, he has had some focus and some hard words and choice words to say to us, but he's cut aid like all over Africa. He's cut it all over the world because he says a lot of the aid that he provides worldwide, basically he's not getting value for money. He says that he's not getting anything actually in return for the aid that he provides. Now, what he's actually asking for is there actually to be some benefit to the aid that's being given, whether that be preferential treatment given to the US or them to, kowtow to Donald Trump a little bit more. I mean, we've seen this with Zelensky. He's told Zelensky he doesn't see why he's funding the war in Ukraine because he doesn't get anything for it, so give him his minerals. And this may very well be the play in Africa. We don't know. But anyway, that's the rationality behind what Trump's doing. So you may say, well, Solidariteits is directly responsible for all these cuts. And the answer is, no, they're not. The actual party who's directly responsible for Trump getting a lot of the publicity is probably Elon in all effects. And Elon's just miffed because he's still a South African citizen as of today. Remember, this was his country of birth. And he can't even set up Starlink here because of, BE criteria. And he thinks that's outrageous. You can let me know what you think in the comment section below. Is that outrageous? I don't know, you let me know. So, what does this actually all end up with? Yeah, it's actually a hard one to tell. Let's just get quickly on to some other news. In terms of the budget, I predicted that we'd land up with a 1% VAT increase. Well, current increased suggestion is around between 0.5 and 0.75%. Apparently, if the DA don't support this, Ramaphosa is going to seek approval from the EFF to get this passed. Problem is, the EFF don't want this either. So actually, it's more likely that the EFF and the DA are going to tag team against you. This isn't going to work how you think it is. Anyway, our store reckon we're going to get like a 1% pay increase and we'll cut some of the subsidies that we shouldn't have. In other news, Prasa. Yep, some Prasa executives have been accused of paying dodgy tenders. Apparently, they even paid 2 billion rand to a one-day-old company. Yep, that one-day-old company had links to China and some AZ people. Who knew? For all those of you who say, don't worry about Trump, don't worry about America, China will save us. I said this once, I said this twice. All the data shows us that China is an extractor. They take money out the country, they don't give money in. Here's a really good example. Chinese railway company, one day old, 2 billion rand. Nothing delivered. In fact, so little has been delivered that the hawks are actually probing the whole payment to see, well, where'd it go? What for? Nobody knows. If you do know, let them know. In any case, on a final point, and somebody else who doesn't actually understand what's going on in the country, well, this is the police minister. The police minister has said Afriforum needs to provide evidence that basically the crime statistics that they produced, which said that farm murders were down, was incorrect. He said that they said only one farmer had actually been killed during the last reporting period, whereas Afriforum said, no, it was more like 12. He said, well, prove it. And this actually becomes a problem because quite often crime in the country isn't actually taken seriously or reported through the correct channels. So Afriforum may actually have a more accurate definition of what's going on or more accurate record because many of the records in the police just disappear for reasons. Anyway, you let me know what you think of all the news that's gone on today. It's so much to cover. It's actually been a bizarre couple of days. It's like sometimes there's nothing that happens in the news and then it just all happens at once. So what do you think? Is Afriforum treasonous? Is Trump putty? I don't know. Let me know. Comment section below. Until tomorrow. Bye.